Hi, everyone. We wanted to welcome you to another student organization training with myself, Rhodes Martin, and our coordinator from Tempe, Hannah Steyerwalt. And we're going to be talking to you today about officer transitions and organization resources for student clubs and organizations. So today we're going to kind of go over smooth officer transitions and how that all takes place, the timeline of the transition, how that works with re-registration, some things to consider when making your transition, and then different organization resources that officers should be aware of as they transition into leadership.
All right, we're going to start off by talking about smooth officer transitions in general. So what do we mean by a smooth transition? Essentially, that your transitions are taking place as per your organization's constitution, which is a governing document for your organization, and also keeping in mind that these materials are ready to be shared at any point for your organization, because it's not always guaranteed that your transition is going to happen in your election season as planned. So ensuring that the transition can be smooth means ensuring that it could happen at any time in a smooth manner. So why does it matter overall? First of all, timeliness and priority time for re-registration. So re-registration for clubs opens every year on April 1st and stays open through the whole month of April. And we want to make sure that your documents are up to date and that your officers are transitioned before that point so that you can give the university the most up-to-date information on your organization. And this also helps for continuous club growth. So if you're ready to transition at any point, when that transition does happen, you're going to spend less time focusing on, okay, how do we rewrite the Constitution? Like, did we have an event plan next month? I'm not really sure. Did we have an outstanding budget request? You're going to already know the answers to those questions, which will help your organization continue amongst its regular daily activities instead of taking a big break to transition. So to talk a little bit more specifically about timeline, as I stated before, your club should have the general transition materials ready at all points for your group. But of course, you should also be reviewing them each election session for your group. And on that note of elections, we also strongly recommend that your elections and transitions happen early in the spring semester to ensure that the new officers are the ones submitting the club's re-registration with the university in April. We're going to get into that a little bit further, but basically the point is we want your contacts with the university to be the most up to date. So let's dive into that re-registration a little bit. So, organization re-registration is mandatory every April, as stated prior, for all of your organizations to stay in good status with the university. And having the officers listed on that registration, you can list 3 officers, officer 1, 2, and 3, ensuring that they're going to be in office for some time, or that those are the new officers rather than the year's previous officers, helps us to ensure that you're receiving the proper communications. So we will pull all the contacts of all the officers off Sun Devil Sync, and that's how we'll send out newsletters, information about events, any updates to university policies or protocol you should be aware of. So let's say you were to like transition an officer 6 months after registration, and this kind of goes into that section of roster updates there. If your officers change but you do not update them on Sun Devil Sync, the past officers will be the ones receiving the communications, and therefore the new officers will be out of the loop. So making sure that you make these changes before re-registration can be a really great way to kind of get ahead of some of these challenges. And of course, if your officers change at any point, we totally understand that it's not always as simple, not always as black and white as they're just going to switch one time per year in March. You can always update your roster at any point, and you're welcome to reach out to any of the student organizations and leadership's contacts, which we'll give you at the end of the presentation to help you figure that out. So next, we're going to talk about just a couple of things to consider with your transitions. Kind of an overview of some stuff we've already talked about and a little bit new information. So again, keep in mind, re-registration opens every year in April, and you want to make sure that this registration can be the most up to date. If you know you want to make a constitution change, try to make it before this happens so that your most up-to-date constitution is published on Sun Devil Sync. It will be less work for you to have to try to finish it later, and then also to ensure that it's in compliance with our policies. Submitting it all at once, it'll all get checked all at once, and it should help smooth over and speed up the process. Now, another really important one for transitions are your organization bank accounts. If your organization has established its own bank account separate from the university, so this does not include GPSA or USG funds, this would be things like money from your members, your dues, or fundraising. And also, it's not required that you have your own bank account. But if you do, always ensure that someone has access to it in case of a transition. Maybe that's your top two officers and your advisor. If the advisor is planning on staying with the organization longer than the students might be, or just make sure you, before you transition, that you go visit your bank and make sure that all the documents are transitioned and up to date to ensure that everyone has access and that you don't accidentally lock yourself out of any of your dues or fundraising. Next, Sun Devil Sync in general. So registration happens on Sun Devil Sync, but this is the thing with your roster. Make sure you keep it up to date for the sake of all communications. So this is not just with us, with the official university people. This is also for people interested in your club or people who want to collaborate with your organization. If your officers are not up to date, well, that's the public information that students can see. So they might be reaching out to the wrong people and trying to connect with your club and you won't even know. So you want to make sure that all of your officers and your members are up to date for the sake of those communications. And last but not least, and probably most importantly, actually, you want to make sure that you're keeping track of your officer terms and meeting minutes to ensure compliance with your constitution. So if your constitution says your election should be happening in April, well, maybe make sure that your meeting minutes reflect at a meeting in April that you've had these elections, that you took a vote, who won, by how many votes, things like that, just in case you ever have any issues where maybe the club kind of goes stagnant for a few months and you're like, okay, wait, who was in charge? What's happening? Um, Always keep that up to date. You can also upload those meeting minutes to Sun Devil Sync if that helps you keep track of them. And always just keep in mind, again, that we are here to assist with any of these things. So if you ever are struggling with any record keeping or have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us.
Okay, so now we're going to go over some of the organization resources that you have as a club member and as well as a club officer, and that are good to be aware of when you're transitioning into an officer position. So the first one that is we're going to talk about is Sun Devil Sync. So Sun Devil Sync is where everything is going to take place for your organization. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but it's always good to just repeat this, that Sun Devil Sync is where you'll go to submit events, to submit any funding requests, to update your club roster, and to complete that club re-registration that we're talking about that takes place in April. Sun Devil Sync is kind of the one-stop shop for everything with student organizations at ASU, and it's a great place for you to start and to make sure you're walking through your new officers on how to run everything, and especially how to run everything with now that they'll have officer access on Sun Devil Sync, which will change a little bit of how they view things and give them more of the managed side of things on the club page. And then secondly is that Sun Devil Sync or that Canvas has a lot of trainings and resources on student orgs and organizations. We put on a lot of these trainings and different workshops and stuff like that. And so does USG for appropriations and other things like that. And so does GPSA that you can access as a club member and as an officer just by going on to Canvas and searching for club resources or going through any of this like handbook or student org pages and or even just reaching out to your student org contact and asking for additional training. There's a lot of different training, whether it's on funding, best ways to plan for an event, as you're seeing right now, transitioning officers, and so many that are available to all club members. The next one we're going to talk about is communication. So one of the cool tools that we have here at ASU is Slack. Slack is pretty much like a workspace tool that everyone can use at ASU to to communicate with different members of ASU, whether that's students, staff, faculty. You can also create your own Slack channel for your organization. So to do this, you would just follow the link that you see below, which is just by searching ASU Slack in a search engine, whether that's Google, Bing, whatever, and then going to the request a new workspace tab under Slack, and you can create a kind of like GroupMe or Facebook, but this is one that's ASU affiliated that has everyone already plugged in there with their ASU rights, and you can reach out and communicate things to your club. You can share marketing, you can share important dates, you can ask questions, run polls. Slack's a great place for you to just stay in communication with your organization and the members inside your organization. It's also really easy to move people out of once they leave. They can just leave the Slack channel and things like that. So it's keeps it nice and simple, and you can change who is kind of in charge of it just by starting up, like just having someone run and generate what goes into the Slack and what kind of communication you're setting forward there. Next is we're gonna go a little bit more onto Sun Devil Sync, but with the events side of things. So Sun Devil Sync is great for putting your events in, and why we really encourage putting your events in Sun Devil Sync is for students that maybe are looking for a new event or aren't sure where they want to go. They a lot of them come to this. This is the Explore page, and we're looking specifically at ASU downtown. They have this for every single campus, and it just shows you what events are taking place this week. And this is where students that are like looking for a new thing to do or something like that, or looking for an internship or want more information, can come to this and see what events are taking place that week. So if your event that you're hoping to have students at is not being put in here, you're missing that opportunity to get students, to get new students that are trying to join your club or interested in just learning about different things going on campus. So always make sure that you're putting in here, make sure that you're putting a little graphic in. That way it's just easier to attract people. It helps make your club stand out a little bit more and get people to your events. Next would be reservations. So if you ever need to reserve a space on any of the ASU campuses, you're going to want to go to the EOSS website. That stands for Educational Outreach and Student Services, as you see down here in the picture on the right. And then what you would do once you're on this page is you would click on the Student Service tab and then go over to the fourth column on the right, where you can see all the different places at ASU. So these are the Memorial Union in Tempe, Student Unions and Centers, Poly Sachs at West, Student Union at the Post Office at downtown, the Student Pavilion. All these are different places you can go to reserve a space as an organization at ASU. So you would just go to one of these pages, whether that's downtown, Tempe, Poly, West, click on that, and then fill out the reservation form to reserve a space. And to reserve a space at most of these places, you do have to have an event already created in Sun Devil Sync. So that's how they kind of go, why we have them stacked up like this and why we teach them like this is that you need to create that event to then go ahead and reserve that space. And then finally is permits. So permits, what we're talking about with permits is the special event registry. Basically what you're going to want to do with that is you can follow this link and it'll give you the guidelines for the special event registry. But a good way to always just make sure you're staying inside the guidelines and following what you need for special event registry and when you need to fill out that form is to go through the ASU handbook, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the ASU handbook is a great thing for student clubs and organizations that pretty much gives you the guidelines on when you need to be filling out an event registry, who you need to have there, and like what number of people require different things. So a good way to just always stay on top of it is that anytime you're planning to host a large scale event or anything like that, make sure you're checking the guidelines and seeing if that form needs to fill it out. Typically, when the form does need to be filled out, they want it 30 days in advance. So please, if you're going to be hosting a large event, please get on top of it early in planning out, getting the form signed, working with permits. If you're working with any of the cities, whether it's the city of Tempe or city of Phoenix, also make sure you're doing that well in advance. That way you can make sure you're getting all the permits filled out, any additional funding that you need to pay things for those cities taken care of ahead of time. Next, so for funding resources, what a lot of people always want to know about is how can we get funding for these things. So for undergraduate students, we have USG. It takes place on every single campus. And then for graduate students, we have GPSA. So these are what I've shown here on the right are just kind of the two main pages for USG Tempe and then for GPSA. That are just like what you'll go to if you just go to funding. And both these pages, there's trainings, information, and all sorts of things on specifically how funding works on that campus. Or if you're for GPSA, it doesn't matter what campus you are. It's just all the same, no matter which campus you're at, no matter what college. But a lot of what you want to do for funding is make sure that you're going to these trainings, checking it early before you're filling out your request on Sun Devil Sync. So Sun Devil Sync is where you'll go to fill out your request, but you need to make sure you're doing the training and checking the funding requirements and things to know before you go here. That way, when you do go fill out your request on Sun Devil Sync, you already know what's required, you know what I need to put where, and you're not getting the thing sent back to you or denied 3 or 4 times and messing with the timeline. Going on this, learning the exact steps you need, when you can submit, when are the deadlines, is just a better way to go about it, because then it can make the process go a lot smoother and kind of just increase productivity in the funding and getting it done quicker. And then for fundraising, once again, this is what I'm going to reference the handbook that we have for student organizations and clubs. And please, when you're doing an officer transition, please go through the handbook with the new officer. It's just a great way to know what is taking place on this year in clubs and organizations, where the guidelines are, and that sort of things. Both fundraising, ASU does allow fundraising by student organizations. There's just different guidelines that need to be followed depending on what kind of fundraising is taking place, whether you're partnering with a college or the local nonprofit in the area. Fundraising can never just be straight up selling, like selling merchandise or something like that. It always needs to have a goal for a nonprofit or for some sort of fundraising that is clearly outlined. And so the best way to stay within these guidelines is just to reference a handbook. You can go right onto the handbook and do a Command F or a Command Search for fundraising, and it'll give you the full page of guidelines and how to like walk through that and make sure that you're not stepping in outside the lines or anything like that. And if you ever do have additional questions on fundraising, please feel free to reach out to any of your club coordinators on any of the campuses, whether that's Hannah on Tempe, myself on downtown, Sebastian on West, or Gabby on Poly. There's club contacts that are well versed in how to handle fundraising, and you can reach out to them, ask them any questions to make sure you're staying inside those guidelines. Okay, next we're going to talk about just general training and organization use services. So our team here at Student Connection Community, you can also look us up as Student Engagement. A lot of times, ASU Student Engagement, ASU Student Connection Community kind of go hand in hand. But we have YouTube videos that we made all summer that pretty much walk through a lot of the processes that we've discussed and are great tools for new officers and officer transitions. We go through the best ways to market an event. We go through the ways to host a meeting. We go through re-registration. We go through the importance of Sun Devil Sync. We go through Constitution updates, which is something that always trips people up once the new semester starts. Those YouTube videos are great, and they're a great way to always just have and be able to go back to and check to make sure you're staying inside the guidelines and that you're staying in good standing with ASU. No one wants to get their club frozen or to have any problems or get things denied, because then it just makes things a bigger hassle. So just make sure you're checking those YouTube videos, checking trainings, reaching out to your club contacts on every single campus. That way that you're knowing that you're staying inside the guidelines and you're doing things correctly, or that you're able to get any questions answered. And for those club contacts, as I was mentioning earlier, we have Gabrielle Flowers on the Poly campus, Sebastian Solis Felix on the West campus. Tempe's got a great team with Hannah Steyerwalt, Christopher Watts, Alex Lewis. Any three of them can help you, or they can get you pointed in the right direction. For anyone on the Tempe campus, and then myself here, Rhodes, Martin, downtown, all of us are able to help. And if you are on one of the other, if you're on like a campus, say you're on Poly or you're on West or you're on downtown, and you have a question about Tempe, please feel free to ask us and we can get you connected, or we can just ask the question ourselves and get the answer for you. We work together, we meet weekly, we all work well together to make sure that we're giving you the best experience you can and to make this process as easy as possible. I know officer transition can sometimes seem stressful, but it should be an exciting experience as you're taking over this new club and getting that responsibility and moving forward with your club for the next year.
Awesome. Thank you all for tuning in with us today. If you are watching this in person, definitely chat to any of the club representatives to get any links to any of these resources. And if you're not watching it in person, chances are you've already found our YouTube, and there should be some resources in the description. And as Rhodes said, definitely check out the other videos on our channel. But otherwise, definitely reach out to any of us if you have any questions about your clubs or organizations, or even if you're not in an organization and you want to start one. But yes, thank you all for tuning in today.
Thanks, everyone.